Sir, you need to stop the gala.
Stop the gala? Because of what? What exactly do you think you're seeing?
Movement where there shouldn't be movement. Everybody move away from the center.
What joint?
The one your monitoring system is not warning you about.
How do you know all this?
This isn't the first structure I've learned to read.
How much time?
We should stop thinking in minutes. You should go.
So should you.
Sir, you need to stop the gala. Maya Brooks said it quietly, but somehow the words cut through the music, the laughter, and the soft clink of crystal glasses. For one strange second, the Grand Meridian Ballroom seemed to hold its breath. More than 300 guests in tuxedos and evening gowns stood beneath a spectacular glass ceiling 40 feet above the marble floor, while the lights of downtown Chicago glittered beyond the windows. At the center of it all stood Ethan Caldwell, 42, billionaire CEO of Caldwell Aeronautics, a man accustomed to having entire rooms wait for his next sentence. His navy suit was immaculate. His expression was composed. His blue eyes shifted from the investors surrounding him to the young black waitress standing several feet away with a silver tray balanced against a red apron. Maya looked completely out of place in the conversation, at least to everyone who believed uniforms were evidence of intelligence. One executive gave an uncomfortable laugh. Another glanced toward the banquet manager, as if Maya had interrupted the evening to complain about a broken coffee machine. Ethan studied her. "Stop the gala," he repeated. Maya nodded. She wasn't smiling anymore. "Yes, sir." The executive beside Ethan chuckled. "Because of what?" Maya didn't answer immediately. Her warm brown eyes moved upward, not toward the enormous chandelier, not toward the stars visible through the glass, toward a steel connection near the western edge of the ceiling. Something there had changed, something almost nobody else in the room would have noticed. Ethan followed her gaze, but saw nothing unusual. "We have engineers, security personnel, and building management here tonight," he said evenly. "If there's a problem, they'll handle it." Maya tightened her fingers around the tray. "There is a problem." Now, several people were watching. The banquet manager hurried toward her, embarrassment already coloring his face. "Maya, return to your station." She didn't move. That alone changed the temperature of the room. Waitresses moved when managers told them to move. Employees apologized. Employees disappeared. But Maya remained beneath the golden light, staring upward as though the ceiling were speaking a language only she understood. Ethan's expression sharpened. "What exactly do you think you're seeing?" he asked. Maya finally looked at him. "Movement where there shouldn't be movement." The executive laughed again. "And you're qualified to determine that." A few nearby guests smiled. Maya heard them. She had heard that kind of laughter before. The laughter people used when they had already decided what someone could possibly know. She didn't defend herself. She didn't explain her past. She simply looked back at the ceiling. Somewhere above them came a faint metallic tick. Tiny, almost delicate. The jazz quartet continued playing. Champagne continued pouring. Conversations slowly restarted. The Billionaire's Gala had raised millions of dollars that evening, and nobody wanted a waitress turning its grand finale into an evacuation over a sound they could barely hear. The banquet manager reached Maya and lowered his voice. "That's enough." Ethan checked his luxury watch. His keynote speech was scheduled in less than 2 minutes. "Maya, is it?" he asked. She nodded. "On whose authority are you asking me to evacuate my own gala?" The question wasn't cruel. That almost made it worse. It carried the calm certainty of a man who had spent decades believing authority came with titles, credentials, corner offices, and names printed on buildings. Maya looked at him, then at the hundreds of people beneath the glass. Her answer was only one word: gravity. The executive's smile disappeared. A strange brightness flashed across the ceiling. Not lightning. Too white. Too sudden. Beyond the glass, the night sky bloomed with a brilliant streak, followed by a distant burst that turned darkness into daylight for half a heartbeat. Guests gasped and lifted their phones. Someone shouted, that it was a meteor. Others applauded, believing they had just witnessed a spectacular accident of nature. Maya didn't applaud. She watched the steel. Then the pressure wave reached the building. The windows trembled. Crystal glasses chimed against one another. The chandelier swayed. And directly above Ethan Caldwell, a thin silver line appeared. Across one enormous pane of glass, Maya set down her tray. Everybody move away from the center. This time, she didn't ask. Before we continue, if you enjoy unforgettable stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary moments, subscribe to Hidden Tables. Every story reminds us that true character is revealed through courage, compassion, and the choices we make when no one is watching. Now, let's see what happens next. The first crack did not send people running. It made them curious. That was the problem. Dozens of guests raised their phones toward the glass ceiling, eager to capture the brilliant streak fading beyond the Chicago skyline. A few even applauded, convinced they had witnessed something rare and beautiful. Maya Brooks saw something else. The narrow silver line above Ethan Caldwell had grown longer. "Please move away from the center," she called again. Her voice was stronger now. The banquet manager, Thomas Reed, reached her first. "Maya, lower your voice." "Mr. Reed, look at the ceiling. Building security is handling it. They need to clear this area." Thomas stepped closer, keeping his expression professional for the guests watching them. "You are creating panic." Maya stared at him. "I'm trying to prevent it." 20 feet away, Ethan was already speaking with Daniel Mercer, the Grand Meridian's director of security. Daniel touched the radio at his collar and listened for several seconds. "Engineering reports no alarm from the structural monitoring system," he told Ethan. "The building absorbed the pressure wave. We should keep everyone calm while we verify." Ethan glanced toward Maya. She was still watching the ceiling and the glass. Laminated architectural panels, designed for severe weather loads. It sounded reassuring. More importantly, it came from the person officially responsible for knowing. Ethan nodded. "Then verify quickly." That decision made perfect sense inside the world Ethan understood. Experts advised. Executives decided. Employees followed procedure. Maya occupied the lowest rung in that chain, carrying champagne instead of credentials anyone could see. But buildings did not care about organizational charts. Another metallic tick sounded overhead. Maya heard it. She watched a steel fitting near the western support shift by what looked like less than half an inch. Almost nothing. Except almost nothing could become everything when thousands of pounds of glass were suspended 40 feet above a crowded ballroom. "Maya," Thomas pointed toward the service corridor. "Back to your station." Now, she looked at him, then toward the guests beneath the center span. A woman was laughing beside the stage. Two investors were taking a photograph. A server collected empty glasses beneath the chandelier. Nobody looked afraid because the people with authority had told them there was no reason to be afraid. Maya slowly stepped backward, not because she agreed, because she needed a better view. For near the ballroom wall, she could see the western support line more clearly. The chandelier moved slightly, although the building itself had stopped trembling. Her breathing changed. She counted silently. 1 second, 2, 3. The movement did not settle. Ethan returned toward the stage as the master of ceremonies approached him. "Should we delay the keynote?" the man asked. Ethan looked around the room. Hundreds of faces were waiting for reassurance. Investors, employees, journalists, civic leaders. A frightened crowd could become dangerous even without a structural problem. "Give security 60 seconds, Ethan said. Across the ballroom, Maya heard that answer. 60 seconds. She looked upward again. A tiny fragment of decorative material dropped onto an empty tablecloth near the center aisle. No one noticed except her. Maya crossed the floor immediately. Thomas intercepted her. "I told you to stop. Something is moving above Section 3. Enough. Send someone to inspect the Western connection." His patience disappeared. "You're a waitress, Maya. You do not make structural calls." The words were quiet, but Ethan, standing nearby, heard them. Maya did not flinch. She looked directly at Thomas. "Then find someone who does and ask them why that joint is separating." Daniel Mercer turned toward the ceiling for the first time with genuine concern. Ethan followed his gaze. Another faint sound traveled across the room. Tick. Then another. Tick. The laughter began fading. Ethan looked at Maya, no longer seeing only the red apron and black name tag. "What joint?" he asked. Maya pointed toward the western edge. "The one your monitoring system is not warning you about." Daniel lifted his radio immediately. Before anyone answered, a sharper crack echoed overhead. Every conversation stopped. Maya's eyes stayed on the ceiling. "That," she said softly, "is why I wanted everyone moved." The sound changed everything. It was no longer a distant tick that could be dismissed beneath jazz and conversation. It was sharp enough to make 300 faces turn upward at once. Maya Brooks watched Daniel Mercer raise his radio, but she already knew what mattered. The Western connection had shifted again. "Move the tables beneath the center span," she said. Thomas Reed stared at her. "Maya, security is handling this. Then help them." There was no anger in her voice. That was what unsettled him. She sounded certain. Ethan Caldwell stepped closer. "Daniel." Daniel listened to his radio. "Engineering is checking the sensor network now." Maya looked across the ballroom. The Meteor flash had faded, but the guests remained restless. Some whispered. Others recorded the ceiling with their phones. A few began moving toward the exits without waiting for instructions. Maya noticed an elderly couple standing directly beneath the chandelier and walked toward them. "Ma'am, sir, would you please come closer to the wall?" The woman hesitated. "Is something wrong?" Maya gave her a calm smile. "We're just creating some space while security checks everything." She guided them away without alarming anyone. Then she moved to another table, and another. It looked like ordinary service, except Maya was quietly emptying the most exposed part of the ballroom. Ethan noticed. So did Thomas. "She's going to frighten everyone," Thomas muttered. Ethan did not answer. His attention had shifted to Maya's face. She was not behaving like someone guessing. She was tracking the ceiling from one support to another, studying distances, listening between sounds. 3 hours earlier, those same eyes had been nearly invisible to everyone in the room. Maya had arrived through the employee entrance at 5:15 that evening, 10 minutes early as always. She had tied her natural curls into a high ponytail, buttoned her white-collared shirt, secured her bright red apron, and checked her black name tag before stepping onto the floor. The Grand Meridian was preparing for one of its biggest events of the year. White tablecloths stretched across the ballroom. Gold lights reflected through hundreds of suspended glass panels. Staff hurried between tables while florists adjusted centerpieces and technicians tested microphones. Maya had paused beneath the western side of the ceiling for only a moment. "Beautiful, is it not?" another server had asked. Maya had smiled. "Complicated." That answer earned a laugh. Maya let pass. She had spent most of the evening being treated like part of the furniture. A guest handed her an empty glass without looking at her. Another called her Miss, only after snapping his fingers twice. One investor asked whether she could find someone who knew the wine list, although Maya had been assigned to that exact table. She answered every question professionally. She smiled when kindness deserved a smile. She remained composed when arrogance did not. But while everyone else studied watches, dresses, company logos, and people worth knowing, Maya studied the room itself. She noticed the long glass spans, the steel trusses, the expansion joints near the perimeter. She noticed that one Western fitting looked newer than the others, its finish slightly brighter beneath the warm lights. She had stared at it for perhaps 2 seconds before Thomas appeared behind her. "Maya, table 12 needs water." "Yes, sir." She returned to work. Yet 20 minutes later, passing beneath the same area, she heard something. Tick. She stopped. The sound vanished beneath the music. Maya looked up again. Nothing obvious. No emergency. No reason anyone else would care. So she continued serving. But she remembered it. Now, after the meteor burst and the pressure wave, that tiny detail had become impossible to ignore. Back in the present, Daniel's radio finally crackled with an answer. His expression tightened. "One of the Western sensors is offline." Ethan looked at him. Since when? Daniel hesitated. Maya did not. That is the wrong question. Ethan turned toward her. She pointed upward. The question is what happened before it went offline. The question is what happened before it went offline. Maya's words landed differently now. No one laughed. Daniel Mercer pressed the radio closer to his ear, while Ethan Caldwell watched him with the focused expression that had unsettled competitors across conference tables for nearly 20 years. Give me the last sensor reading, Ethan said. Daniel repeated the request into his radio. Thomas Reed stood beside them, suddenly less interested in sending Maya back to work. Around the ballroom, guests had begun speaking in lower voices. The jazz quartet had stopped playing. Without music, every small sound seemed amplified. Shoes against marble, glasses touching tables, the low hum of ventilation. Then another faint metallic tick from overhead. Ethan looked up. How long has she been reporting this? He asked. Thomas hesitated. She mentioned the ceiling earlier tonight. Maya turned toward him. Twice. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Twice. Thomas straightened his jacket. There was no visible emergency. She's banquet staff. We followed procedure. There it was. Procedure. A word that could mean discipline when things worked and shelter when they did not. Ethan knew that language well because he had built an empire around systems, accountability, and chains of command. Caldwell Aeronautics employed more than 18,000 people. Ethan believed good organizations worked because the right information reached the right person at the right time. Yet standing beneath 40 feet of glass, he was beginning to understand the weakness hidden inside that belief. Information could arrive perfectly and still be ignored because of who delivered it. What exactly did you report? Ethan asked Maya. A repeating sound near the western connection, then visible movement after the pressure wave. And before tonight? Nothing. You are certain? Yes. Ethan studied her. He was not accustomed to answers without hesitation. Most people around him softened their language. They added maybe, probably, I think. Maya did not. Daniel's radio finally responded. He listened, then lowered it slowly. The sensor showed abnormal vibration for approximately 40 seconds before communication failed. Thomas went pale. Ethan remained still. Threshold below the automatic evacuation trigger. Maya looked upward. Because the sensor measures vibration, it does not tell you why something is moving. Daniel turned toward her. How do you know what that system measures? Thomas interrupted before she could answer. Mr. Caldwell, with respect, we should let the professionals evaluate this. Ethan looked at him. She noticed the problem before your professionals did. Silence. Thomas glanced away. Maya could have enjoyed that moment. She could have smiled. She could have reminded him of every time he had dismissed her. She did none of those things. Her attention stayed on the guests. That was the difference Ethan noticed. She was not trying to win an argument. She was trying to keep people calm. We should move everyone toward the perimeter in small groups, Maya said. No running. No sudden announcement unless you want 300 people pushing toward two doors. Daniel nodded almost instinctively. Thomas noticed that too. We have 4 exits, Daniel said. 2 main doors, 1 service corridor, 1 access hall behind the stage. Maya looked toward the western side. Do not use the access hall yet. Why? It runs beneath the section that moved. Ethan turned to Daniel. Can you confirm that? Daniel checked the ballroom plan on his phone. His expression changed. She is right. For the first time that evening, Ethan Caldwell looked at Maya not as a waitress who happened to notice something, but as a person whose mind was operating several steps ahead of everyone around her. He wanted to ask why. He wanted to know what she knew and where she had learned it. But another sound came from above, softer than the last, and somehow more troubling. Maya's gaze snapped toward the western fitting. We can talk later, she said. Right now, start moving people. Ethan did. Not challenge her. He turned toward Daniel. Do it. Daniel immediately called his team. Security personnel began quietly directing guests toward the safer perimeter. Thomas stood motionless for a second, absorbing the reversal taking place in front of him. Less than 5 minutes earlier, he had ordered Maya back to her station. Now the billionaire whose name had brought everyone into the room was acting on her warning. Ethan watched the first groups move. Then he looked at Maya. You still have not answered my question. Which one? How do you know all this? Maya's eyes lifted toward the ceiling once more. Because this is not the first structure I have learned to read. Because this is not the first structure I have learned to read. Ethan held Maya's gaze for a moment, but she was already moving. There would be time for explanations later. Right now, the ballroom needed space, order, and people willing to listen before fear made decisions for them. Daniel Mercer directed security toward the eastern and southern exits, while Maya walked quickly between tables, asking guests to leave handbags, coats, and champagne behind. Most obeyed. Some did not. A silver-haired investor near table 9 frowned at her. My wife is getting her coat. Sir, please ask her to leave it. That coat cost $12,000. Maya looked toward the ceiling, then back at him. Then it has already had a very successful evening. Please move. The man's expression tightened, but Ethan appeared behind Maya. Do what she says. That ended the argument. 10 minutes earlier, people had barely looked at her when she refilled their glasses. Now, they watched her hands for direction. Power had not disappeared from the room. It had simply changed addresses. Thomas Reed followed Maya toward the center aisle. The Western Connection was inspected before the event, he said, almost defensively. Maya stopped. When? This afternoon. By whom? Facilities. Was anything replaced? Thomas hesitated. Maya noticed. What was replaced? A decorative mounting assembly. Nothing structural. Where? He pointed toward the western edge. Maya's eyes lifted. The brighter fitting she had noticed earlier suddenly made sense. That is what I was looking at before dinner. Thomas shook his head. The work order was approved. Approved does not mean installed correctly. His jaw tightened. You are making assumptions. No, I'm asking questions you should have asked when I reported the sound. Ethan heard that from several feet away. He said nothing. He did not need to. Thomas's face showed that the sentence had landed. 3 hours earlier, Maya had tried. She remembered standing beneath that same section with a water pitcher in her hand, listening to the faint tick above the music. She had found Thomas near the service station. Mr. Reed, has anyone worked on the ceiling recently? He had barely looked up from his tablet. Why? One of the western fittings looks newer than the others, and I heard movement. Thomas had sighed. Maya, we have a Billionaire's Gala starting in 20 minutes. Please focus on your tables. I'm focused. I just think someone should check it. That was when another banquet supervisor, Kyle Bennett, had walked past and laughed. You serve champagne. Let the engineers worry about the ceiling. Maya remembered the words because everyone nearby had heard them. She also remembered what came next. Nothing. No apology. No inspection. No question about why a waitress had noticed a structural detail in the first place. Maya had returned to work, but she had taken out her phone during a quiet moment and photographed the fitting from 2 angles. Not because she expected disaster, because details mattered. Her father had taught her that long before she ever wore a red apron. Back in the present, Maya pulled out her phone. I photographed it before the gala. Daniel stepped closer. She showed him the image. Ethan leaned in. The photograph looked ordinary to him. Glass, steel, bolts, reflected lights. Maya enlarged the Western Connection. Look here. Daniel's eyes narrowed. That plate is not sitting flush. It was not sitting flush before the pressure wave, Maya said. Thomas stared at the screen. Why did you take this? Maya looked at him. Because nobody else would. For the first time, Thomas had no answer. Then Daniel's radio crackled. A facilities engineer had reached the monitoring station. His voice came through broken by static, but the message was clear enough. The Western sensor had recorded movement before the meteor burst. Ethan slowly turned toward Thomas. The meteor had not created the entire problem. It found a weakness already waiting. Maya looked toward the remaining guests. We need to move faster. Ethan nodded. Tell us where. Maya pointed away from the western side. East perimeter first. Keep everyone beneath the reinforced columns and leave the center clear. Daniel immediately repeated her instructions. Maya took 1 step forward, then stopped as another small sound traveled through the ceiling. Not a crack this time. A low metallic groan. Her expression changed. Ethan saw it. What? Maya whispered. The load is moving. The load is moving. Ethan did not understand the full engineering meaning of those 4 words, but he understood Maya's face. Until that moment, she had been controlled, observant, almost unnervingly calm. Now her eyes moved quickly from the Western connection to the steel members stretching across the ceiling. She was calculating something. "Explain," Daniel said. Maya pointed upward. "That connection is no longer carrying the load the way it was designed to. The surrounding members are compensating." Thomas swallowed. "How can you possibly know that from down here?" Maya looked at him. "Because structures redistribute stress before they fail." Ethan stepped closer. "You studied engineering." It was not a question anymore. Maya paused. For the first time that night, something personal crossed her expression. "Structural engineering. University of Illinois, Chicago." Daniel stared at her. "You graduated?" "No." Thomas almost seemed relieved, as if the missing diploma restored the hierarchy he understood. Maya noticed. So did Ethan. "Why not?" Ethan asked. The ballroom around them continued emptying, but Maya's mind traveled somewhere quieter. 8 years earlier, she had been 17, standing beside her father beneath an unfinished pedestrian bridge on Chicago's South Side. Marcus Brooks had spent 26 years working construction. He never called himself an engineer. He called himself a man who listened to buildings. He would point toward beams, joints, concrete, and steel, and ask his daughter what she noticed. Maya usually answered too quickly. Marcus would smile and say, "Do not tell me what you see first. Tell me what changed." That lesson followed her into college. She loved numbers, but she loved what numbers protected even more. Buildings were not equations on paper. They were classrooms full of children, apartments where families slept, offices where people worked, restaurants where strangers celebrated birthdays. Every calculation carried human weight. Maya had completed nearly 3 years of her degree when Marcus became seriously ill. The medical bills grew. Work hours disappeared. Maya began taking evening shifts, then weekend shifts, then more. Eventually something had to give. It was school. "My father needed me," she told Ethan. 3 seconds of silence held years inside them. Ethan looked at the red apron, then back at her face. "And you never went back?" "Not yet. Not never." Ethan heard the difference. Thomas looked upward again, suddenly uncomfortable with every assumption he had made about her. "Why did you not tell me any of this earlier?" he asked. Maya's expression remained calm. "Would it have changed whether you listened?" Thomas opened his mouth, then closed it. There was no useful answer. Daniel's radio came alive. The facilities engineer reported that the Western assembly had been modified during maintenance 2 days earlier. A replacement plate had been installed after a decorative suspension bracket showed unusual movement. The work had been signed off after a visual inspection. Maya closed her eyes for half a second. They treated the symptom. Daniel frowned. "Meaning, something moved, so they tightened what they could see. But nobody asked why it moved." Ethan looked toward the ceiling. That sentence felt larger than engineering. Maybe organizations failed the same way. Maybe people did too. Fix what was visible. Ignore what caused it. Trust the paperwork, because asking harder questions slowed everything down. Maya's father had taught her differently. Buildings warn you before they fail. Most people simply do not know how to listen. Another group of guests reached the eastern exit. Fewer than 100 remained inside now. Maya watched the western span. The metallic groan faded. For a moment, everything became strangely quiet. Ethan exhaled. "Is that good?" Maya shook her head. "Not necessarily." Then a thin line raced across a second glass panel several feet from the first. Daniel saw it. Thomas saw it. Ethan saw it. Nobody questioned Maya now. "How much time?" Ethan asked. Maya studied the ceiling, the columns, the distance to the exits, and the people still waiting. When she answered, her voice was barely above a whisper. "If that connection keeps transferring load, we should stop thinking in minutes." "Then we think in seconds," Ethan said. Maya turned toward him, and for the first time that evening, the billionaire was not asking whether she was qualified. He was asking what came next. "Clear the center completely," she said. "Keep everyone close to the reinforced perimeter columns. No running. No stopping for personal belongings." Ethan faced Daniel. "Make it happen." Daniel raised his radio. Security moved immediately. The remaining guests no longer needed much persuasion. They had seen the second fracture. They had heard the metallic groan. The room that had glittered with confidence less than 10 minutes earlier now moved with careful urgency. Maya stepped toward the center aisle and looked upward. The brilliant meteor burst beyond the Chicago skyline had lasted only seconds, but the pressure wave had exposed something that had been waiting quietly above them long before the sky flashed white. A weak connection, a warning dismissed, a problem hidden behind polished glass and approved paperwork. Maya understood the irony. Everyone had been staring at the sky when the real danger was already inside the room. "Maya," Daniel called. "Eastern exit is moving well. Southern exit is slowing down." She looked toward the doors. Guests were bunching together near the southern corridor. "Redirect half of them east. Keep the doorway clear." Daniel repeated the instruction without hesitation. Thomas heard it and said nothing. Minutes earlier, he had treated Maya's certainty as insubordination. Now professional security officers were repeating her words through radios. But Maya felt no satisfaction. Winning an argument meant nothing if people were still beneath the glass. Then the building gave another low shudder. Not violent, not dramatic, just enough to make the chandeliers sway a few inches. Several guests gasped. "Keep walking," Maya called. "Do not run. You're doing fine. Stay along the perimeter." Her calm traveled farther than panic could. Ethan watched her guide an older woman toward the eastern exit, then help a server move a rolling service cart out of the path. She did not behave like someone trying to become important. She behaved like someone who had forgotten to care whether anyone thought she was important. That distinction struck him harder than he expected. "Daniel," Ethan said, "how many remain?" "About 60. Maya looked toward the stage. "Including staff?" Daniel paused. "I'm counting guests." Maya's eyes sharpened. "Count everyone." Ethan immediately understood. The gala had been built around people like him. Investors, executives, donors, cameras. But dozens of cooks, servers, cleaners, technicians, and hotel employees had made the night possible. In an emergency, they did not become less valuable because their names were missing from the guest list. "All personnel," Ethan told Daniel. "Nobody gets overlooked." Thomas looked toward the service corridor. "Kitchen staff." Maya nodded. In the dish room, Daniel dispatched 2 officers. Another sharp sound came from above. Maya looked up. The fracture across the western panel had widened, and a second line was branching toward its edge. "Everyone away from the center now," she said. This time, Ethan raised his voice with hers. "You heard her. Move." The last clusters accelerated without running. 20 people, then 15, then 10. A security officer reported that the kitchen was clear. Another confirmed the service corridor was nearly empty. Maya finally stepped backward toward the eastern perimeter. Ethan remained beside her. "You should go," she said. "So should you." "I will." That was not an answer. Maya almost smiled, but another sound stopped her. A crisp snap traveled across the ceiling. One small section of decorative trim loosened and dropped onto an abandoned table below. Nobody was near it. Ethan stared at the empty chairs. 30 seconds earlier, people had been sitting there. Maya had moved them. Daniel lowered his radio and looked at her differently now. "You saw that coming." Maya shook her head. "I saw enough to know we should not wait for proof." Then the lights flickered once. The ballroom fell quiet. Somewhere near the western span, steel groaned again. Maya looked toward the remaining exit, then toward the service corridor. Her expression changed. "Where is Thomas?" Ethan turned. Thomas Reed was no longer standing behind them. "Before we continue, if you enjoy stories where the most overlooked people reveal the greatest strength, subscribe to Hidden Tables. Here, every story reminds us that courage, integrity, and kindness can come from the most unexpected places. Now, let's see what happened next." "Thomas went back for the staff roster," Daniel said. Maya's head turned toward the service corridor. "Why?" "He said he wanted to confirm everyone was out." Ethan looked toward the dark opening beyond the ballroom. "How long ago?" "Maybe 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Earlier that evening, 30 seconds had been enough time to pour champagne exchange business cards, or pose beneath the chandelier. Now 30 seconds felt expensive. Maya moved toward the corridor. Ethan caught up beside her. Where are you going? To find him. Security can do that. Security does not know the back hall as well as the banquet staff. Daniel stepped forward. I will send 2 officers. Maya shook her head. Keep the moving people outside. Thomas probably went to the service office near the kitchen. I know the fastest route. Another metallic groan rolled overhead. Ethan looked at the ceiling, then at Maya. You are not going alone. She stopped. Mr. Caldwell, you need to leave. Ethan, this is not the time. Exactly. Before Maya could argue, Daniel's radio crackled. A security officer reported that the eastern exit was clear and the last guests had reached the lower lobby. Staff were still being counted outside. Maya looked toward the service corridor again. 2 minutes, she said. If we do not find him, we leave. Ethan nodded. They moved along the perimeter, staying beneath the reinforced columns as Maya had instructed. The ballroom looked almost unreal now. Hundreds of abandoned glasses remained on white tablecloths. Cherstud ot odangus. Ethan's keynote notes rested untouched on the stage. 10 minutes earlier, the room had been designed to display his power. Now none of it mattered. Not the banners. Not the donors. Not the billion-dollar announcements waiting inside his speech. Maya reached the service entrance and stopped. A ceiling light flickered beyond it. Thomas. No answer. Ethan called his name. Nothing. Maya listened. Then came a distant voice. Here. They followed it into the service office, where Thomas stood beside a desk, holding a clipboard and 2 employee folders. His face changed when he saw them. What are you doing here? Maya stared at the papers. You came back for paperwork? The roster. 2 temporary employees were added this afternoon. I needed their names. Maya's frustration softened. Thomas had made a poor decision, but not for a selfish reason. Are they accounted for? One is, I cannot reach the other. Who? Thomas checked the page. Luis Ortega. Dishwasher. 22. Maya knew him. Quiet. Knew. He had asked her earlier where employees were supposed to take breaks. He might be in the basement locker area, she said. Ethan looked at her. Can we reach it? Maya glanced toward the corridor ceiling. Not through the western stairwell. Thomas pointed toward another door. There's an east service stair. Maya nodded. That keeps us beneath the concrete core. Ethan reached for Thomas's radio. Tell Daniel where we are going. Thomas hesitated. Mr. Caldwell, you should leave. Ethan looked at him. A few minutes ago, Maya told all of us that nobody gets overlooked. I agreed with her. That includes Luis. Thomas transmitted the message. The 3 moved toward the east stairwell. As they reached the door, a deep sound traveled through the building, followed by the faint chime of glass somewhere behind them. Maya stopped and listened. Not panic. Information. Her father had taught her that fear becomes useful only when you make it answer a question. What changed? She looked back toward the ballroom. The western span was settling unevenly. We do not go back that way, she said. Ethan nodded immediately. No debate. No request for credentials. No glance toward Thomas for confirmation. That change was not lost on Maya. The man who had asked on whose authority she spoke was now waiting for her direction. She opened the stairwell door. Stay close to the inside wall. Keep moving. If I stop, you stop. Thomas followed first. Ethan followed behind him. 3 people descended into the concrete stairwell, searching for an employee whose name had not appeared on a guest list, whose face had never been projected onto a ballroom screen, and whose absence might have gone unnoticed on any ordinary night. But this was no longer an ordinary room, and Maya Brooks was no longer willing to let invisible people remain invisible. The stairwell changed the sound of everything. Above them, the ballroom had been filled with radios, voices, and the restless movement of hundreds of people. Here, every footstep echoed against concrete. Maya descended quickly but carefully, one hand sliding along the rail as she counted the floors. Ethan followed without questioning her pace. Thomas came behind him, holding the employee roster against his chest. Luis. Maya called. Her voice traveled downward. No answer. They reached the basement level and found a narrow service hallway illuminated by emergency lights. Maya turned right. Locker room is this way. Ethan glanced toward a wall sign. That says mechanical rooms. Locker room was relocated during renovations, Maya said. Temporary staff still get sent to the old location by mistake. Thomas looked at her. How do you know that? Because employees ask employees questions management forgets to answer. Thomas said nothing. The sentence was not cruel. That made it harder to ignore. They reached the locker area. Empty benches. Open lockers. A forgotten backpack near the wall. Luis. Maya called again. A faint voice answered from farther down the corridor. Hello. Maya immediately moved toward it. They found Luis Ortega near a supply room, confused and holding his phone. Maya, relief crossed his face. I lost signal. The stair door by the kitchen would not open, so I came down here. Thomas exhaled. We have to leave. Luis looked between Ethan and Thomas, then at Maya. What happened upstairs? We will explain outside, Maya said. Stay with us. They turned toward the east stairwell. Then the emergency lights flickered. A low vibration traveled through the concrete beneath their shoes. Luis stopped. Was that another explosion? Maya listened. No. Ethan watched her. What was it? Load transfer. Thomas looked upward, as if he could see through several floors of concrete. From the roof, possibly through the building frame. Maya moved faster. At the stairwell door, she tested the handle. It opened. Good. Inside wall. Single line. Luis entered first. Thomas followed. Ethan waited for Maya. You first, she said. Not this time. She gave him a look that would have silenced most people. Ethan almost smiled. You know the route. I'm staying behind you. There was no time to argue. They climbed. Halfway to the lobby level, Daniel's voice finally came through Thomas's radio. Caldwell Reed, respond. Thomas grabbed it. We found Luis. East stairwell. Coming up. Static answered. Then Daniel's voice returned. Do not return to the ballroom. Repeat, do not return to the ballroom. Western ceiling section is showing significant movement. Ethan looked at Maya. You were right. Maya kept climbing. Save that sentence for outside. They reached the lobby level and pushed through the door. Security officers were waiting. Beyond the main entrance, hundreds of guests and employees stood across the street beneath flashing emergency lights. Daniel hurried toward them. Everyone accounted for? Thomas looked at the roster. Luis raised his hand almost sheepishly. Now they are. Maya scanned the crowd. Servers, cooks, technicians, guests. The elderly couple she had moved earlier. The investor who had worried about his $12,000 coat. All standing under the same cold Chicago night, stripped of the invisible rankings that had defined them inside. Then Daniel's radio erupted with voices. He turned toward the glass entrance. Everybody farther back. Security began moving the crowd away from the building. Ethan looked through the doors toward the ballroom beyond the lobby. From this distance, the golden chandelier was still visible. So was the fractured western span. Maya stared at it. A connection shifted. Then another. Move, she said. Ethan did not ask why. Everybody back, he shouted. The crowd retreated another 50 feet. Seconds later, several ceiling panels inside the empty ballroom released from their compromised supports and dropped onto abandoned tables below, sending a glittering wave of fragments across a room that had been full only minutes earlier. No one was beneath them. No guest. No server. No employee whose name mattered less because it was printed on a temporary roster. Silence spread across the street. Ethan stared through the windows, then slowly turned toward Maya. 300 people had waited for his keynote that night. But when the room truly needed a leader, the most important voice had belonged to the woman they had nearly ordered back to serving drinks. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Across the street, the Grand Meridian still glowed with warm golden light, but the ballroom no longer looked like a monument to wealth. Empty tables stood beneath the damaged ceiling. Champagne glasses remained beside untouched plates. Ethan Caldwell's keynote speech was still waiting on the stage for an audience that would never hear it tonight. Then the questions began. Mr. Caldwell, what happened? Was the building unsafe? Did someone know about the problem? Journalists who had attended the gala were already holding phones toward Ethan. Guests gathered behind the security line. Emergency crews moved toward the entrance while Daniel Mercer briefed them. Ethan could have stepped forward. He had spent years learning how to control a public moment. He knew how to speak without appearing uncertain, how to acknowledge concern without accepting conclusions, how to turn chaos into a message investors could understand. Instead, he looked at Maya. She stood beside Luis Ortega and two other hotel employees, her red apron still tied around her waist. Nobody would have mistaken her for the most powerful person at the gala an hour earlier. Yet Ethan knew titles had become meaningless the moment the ceiling started speaking. A reporter called his name again. Ethan finally approached the cameras. "Everyone is accounted for," he said. Relief moved through the crowd. "That is the only statement that matters right now." Another reporter asked, "Who ordered the evacuation?" Ethan paused. Thomas Reed lowered his eyes. Daniel looked toward Maya. Ethan followed his gaze. She did. Every camera turned. Maya froze for the first time all night. Not because she was frightened, but because attention was a different kind of pressure. She had never asked for it. "Her name is Maya Brooks," Ethan continued. "She identified warning signs before the rest of us understood what we were seeing." A reporter moved closer. "Miss Brooks, are you an engineer?" Maya answered carefully. "I studied structural engineering. Did you know the ceiling would come down?" "No." The honesty surprised them. "Then why did you evacuate everyone?" Maya looked through the glass entrance at the abandoned ballroom. "Because certainty is not always what keeps people safe. Sometimes you recognize enough warning signs to know that waiting for certainty is the dangerous choice." Daniel heard that and nodded. Ethan did too. One of the investors stepped forward, the same man who had refused to leave his expensive coat. "She told us to move before anything happened," he said. "I thought she was overreacting." Maya looked at him. "You moved. That is what matters. No victory. No humiliation. No need to make him smaller, because he had once made her feel small." That restraint carried more weight than revenge ever could. Thomas approached slowly. "Maya." She turned. He struggled with the words. "I should have listened when you reported the fitting." Maya remained silent. "You told me twice," he continued. "I treated your position like it determined the value of what you knew." Ethan watched him carefully. Thomas was not apologizing because cameras were present. He looked like a man finally hearing his own behavior spoken aloud. Maya nodded once. "Then remember this the next time someone without a title tells you something important." Thomas lowered his head. "I will." Daniel's radio interrupted them. A preliminary review from facilities had confirmed what Maya suspected. The replacement plate near the Western Assembly had shown irregular movement before the Meteor event. The pressure wave had accelerated a weakness that already existed. Ethan stared at the building. So, the Meteor did not create the original problem. Daniel shook his head. It exposed it. Maya looked at Ethan. "That happens more often than people think." Ethan understood she was no longer talking only about steel. The weak point had existed in the ceiling. Another had existed in the organization beneath it. A waitress noticed something. A manager dismissed her. A system recorded movement without understanding it. Everyone trusted the hierarchy until reality stopped respecting it. Ethan turned back toward the cameras. "Tomorrow there will be investigations, reports, and difficult questions," he said. "Tonight, remember the reason everyone walked out safely. Someone we almost failed to listen to refused to stop speaking." Maya looked toward the employees standing together beneath the Chicago lights. Ethan had finally understood the lesson. But Maya knew understanding something in a crisis was easy. The real test would come after the danger was gone. By midnight, the street outside the Grand Meridian had become a strange meeting place for people who would never normally stand together. Billionaires waited beside banquet servers. Investors shared bottled water with kitchen workers. Reporters spoke quietly while emergency crews continued inspecting the building. The gala had separated everyone by invitation, title, table number, and access. The sidewalk erased all of it. Maya Brooks stood near the hotel employees, checking names with Thomas Reed one final time. Luis Ortega was there. The cooks were there. The servers were there. Every temporary worker had been located. Everyone who had entered the building for a paycheck would be going home. Only then did Maya finally allow herself to breathe. Her hands trembled slightly as she untied her red apron. Ethan noticed from several yards away. Courage, he realized, did not always look fearless. Sometimes courage waited until everyone else was safe before admitting how frightened it had been. He walked toward her. Maya. She folded the apron over one arm. Mr. Caldwell. Ethan. She gave him a tired look. You are still trying that. I am persistent. I noticed. For the first time that night, they both smiled. Then Thomas approached with his phone. Facilities sent the maintenance documents. His expression was heavy. The replacement plate was installed 48 hours ago. The first inspection noted unusual movement near the assembly. Maya's smile disappeared. The first inspection, Thomas nodded. A technician recommended a more detailed structural review. Ethan's face hardened. Was it done? Thomas looked down. Not before the gala. What? The ballroom had 3 major events scheduled. Management decided the visual inspection was sufficient until the full review could be arranged. Silence settled between them. Maya looked toward the glowing hotel. Suddenly the story was larger than one overlooked waitress and one manager who had failed to listen. Someone had noticed. Someone had documented a concern. Someone else had decided there was time. The Meteor had not invented the weakness. It had simply removed everyone's ability to ignore it. Who made that decision? Ethan asked. Thomas shook his head. The investigation will determine that. Ethan looked ready to demand names immediately, but Maya spoke first. Do not make this about finding one person to blame. Ethan turned toward her. A warning was delayed. Exactly. So find out why a system allowed that warning to become optional. The sentence stopped him. Maya continued. If you fire one person and keep the same culture, everyone learns to hide mistakes better. Nothing actually changes. Ethan stared at her. She had spent the evening reading more than a building. She was reading organizations too. What would you change? He asked. Maya almost laughed. You are asking the waitress? Thomas flinched at the word. Ethan did not. I'm asking the person who has been right all night. Maya looked toward the hotel staff. Give frontline workers a direct safety channel that cannot be buried by a supervisor. Require follow-up when anyone reports structural movement, electrical problems, unusual sounds, anything that could affect guests or employees. And when somebody raises a concern, record what was done about it, not just that somebody received it. Ethan nodded slowly. What else? Stop assuming expertise always arrives wearing the right uniform. That one stayed with him. Nearby, Daniel Mercer approached. Emergency engineers completed the initial assessment. The ballroom will remain closed. They believe the evacuation prevented anyone from being in the affected area when the panels released. Ethan looked at Maya. You saved this room. Maya shook her head. People listened eventually. Let's save the room. After you made them listen, then make sure the next person does not have to fight that hard. Ethan looked around at the employees, investors, cameras, and emergency lights. Hours earlier, he had planned to announce an aerospace initiative worth billions. He had expected that announcement to define the night. Instead, the lesson he would remember came from a 25-year-old woman carrying a tray. Maya picked up her coat. I need to go home. Ethan nodded. Will you meet with me tomorrow? She studied him carefully. About what? Not publicity. Not a reward. He paused. About what happens after people say they learned something. Maya's expression softened, but only slightly. That is the harder part. I know. She looked toward the damaged building one last time. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Ethan nodded. As Maya walked toward the employees waiting for rides home, Thomas watched her go. Do you think she will come? Ethan looked at the ceiling she had understood before any of them did. Yes, he said. The question is whether we will be ready to listen when she does. By 8 the next morning, Maya Brooks had become the woman everyone wanted to. Interview. Her phone filled with messages before she finished her first cup of coffee. Local news stations wanted live appearances. National programs wanted exclusive interviews. Strangers wanted photographs, explanations, inspiration. One video had already traveled across social media millions of times. It showed Maya beneath the Grand Meridian ceiling telling guests to move while people around her hesitated. Another showed Ethan Caldwell turning toward security and saying, You heard her. Listen to her. But the clip spreading fastest was simpler. Maya stood in her red apron while a reporter asked whether she had known exactly what would happen. Her answer was calm. Sometimes you recognize enough warning signs to know that waiting for certainty is the dangerous choice. By 9:30, that sentence was appearing everywhere. Maya turned off her phone. Fame had never been the dream. At 10 o'clock, she entered a temporary conference suite across from the closed hotel. Ethan was already there with Daniel Mercer, Thomas Reed, 2 structural consultants, and representatives from Grand Meridian Management. No stage, no champagne, no applause, just coffee, documents, and uncomfortable truths. Ethan stood when Maya entered. Thank you for coming. Maya took the empty chair. You said this was about what happens next. It is. One consultant opened a preliminary report. The Western Assembly had shown signs of irregular movement before the gala. The replacement work had addressed a visible symptom, but the recommended deeper review had been delayed. The Meteor pressure wave had placed sudden additional stress on an already compromised connection. No single decision explained everything. That was precisely what troubled Maya. Systems rarely failed because of one dramatic mistake. They failed through small assumptions stacked quietly on top of one another. A warning categorized as non-urgent. An inspection postponed. A worker dismissed. A sensor trusted without context. Ethan listened without interrupting. Then a Grand Meridian executive turned toward Maya. We would like to recognize what you did publicly. Perhaps a ceremony when the hotel reopens. Maya's expression did not change. Recognize what? Your courage. And then, the executive hesitated. I am sorry. Maya leaned forward. You can put my photograph in the lobby. You can give me an award. You can tell reporters your company values employees. But what happens when another server hears a strange sound 6 months from now? What happens when a housekeeper smells something unusual? What happens when a dishwasher notices equipment behaving differently? Nobody answered. Maya continued. If they still have to convince 3 managers that they deserve to be heard, then nothing changed. Ethan looked at the executive. She's right. Maya turned toward him. Do not agree with me, because cameras might hear about it. Ethan held her gaze. I am not. Then prove it. The room became still. Ethan slowly closed the report in front of him. Caldwell Aeronautics has 23 facilities across the United States. Starting today, every employee will have direct access to an independent safety reporting channel. No supervisor will be able to close a report without documented review. Daniel nodded. That should apply to contractors too. And temporary workers, Maya added. Especially temporary workers, Ethan said. Thomas looked down at his hands. Grand Meridian should do the same. The hotel executive shifted uncomfortably. That would require corporate approval. Thomas looked at him, then asked for it. Maya glanced toward Thomas. Something had changed in him too. Not perfectly, not magically, but enough to begin. Later that afternoon, Ethan faced reporters outside the hotel. Cameras crowded the sidewalk. The easiest story would have been a billionaire praising a heroic waitress. Ethan refused to make it that simple. Maya Brooks should never have needed extraordinary courage to make ordinary people listen, he said. She warned us. We underestimated her. That failure belongs to the people and systems with more authority than she had. Behind the cameras, Maya listened. Then a reporter asked whether Caldwell Aeronautics planned to hire her. Ethan looked toward Maya before answering. That decision is not mine to announce. Maya stepped forward, and I'm not interested in becoming anybody's symbol. The cameras turned toward her. You do not honor my voice by putting my face on a billboard. You honor it by listening to the next person wearing an apron. No one spoke for a moment. Then Maya stepped away from the microphones. Ethan watched her go and understood something money had never taught him. Respect was not a reward powerful people handed downward. Real respect changed who was allowed to be heard before anyone knew whether they were right. 6 months later, Maya Brooks stood beneath another ceiling. This one was unfinished. Steel beams crossed 40 feet above a new community learning center on Chicago's South Side. Morning sunlight pouring through spaces where glass would eventually be installed. Maya wore a white hard hat instead of a red apron. A rolled set of structural plans rested beneath her arm. She looked upward and smiled. Not because life had suddenly become easy. It had not. Returning to school required long nights, difficult exams, and the uncomfortable experience of walking back into classrooms after years away. But Maya had returned. Ethan Caldwell had offered financial support through an existing education program. But Maya accepted only after one condition was made clear. There would be no special job waiting for her, no ceremonial position, no shortcut around the work. She wanted opportunity, not ownership. She wanted the chance to finish what life had interrupted. Ethan respected that. The changes inside his own company had been less visible but equally important. Every Caldwell Aeronautics employee, contractor, and temporary worker could now submit a safety concern directly for independent review. Reports could not disappear inside management chains. Anonymous concerns received documented responses. Frontline employees were invited into quarterly safety meetings. Grand Meridian eventually adopted similar policies after its investigation confirmed that several small warnings had been treated as separate problems instead of pieces of the same one. Thomas Reed remained with the hotel. Maya had been surprised by that. Ethan had not demanded his firing, and Thomas had not hidden behind excuses. Instead, he helped build the new reporting process and personally trained managers on one principle he once failed to understand. The value of information does not depend on the job title of the person delivering it. The damaged ballroom reopened months later with a redesigned ceiling system and stricter inspection requirements. Reporters returned. Cameras returned. Invitations arrived from Maya. She declined most of them. She did attend one event, but she entered through the front doors this time. Luis Ortega was there too, now enrolled in a hotel management program supported by an employee education fund. Daniel Mercer greeted Maya with a handshake. Thomas simply said, "I listen faster now." Maya laughed. "Good." Ethan found her near the edge of the ballroom, looking upward. "Still reading buildings?" he asked. "They are easier than people. I am beginning to understand that." He had changed too, not into a different man, but into a more attentive one. Power had once taught Ethan that leadership meant being the person with the answer. Maya had taught him that sometimes leadership meant recognizing who else should be speaking. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked. Maya looked toward the restored ceiling. "Sometimes." "What do you remember?" Ethan probably expected the meteor flash. The fractures. The evacuation. Maya remembered something smaller. "The first time I warned everyone, people looked at my apron before they looked where I was pointing." Ethan lowered his eyes. "I did too. I know. I am sorry." Maya studied him for a moment. "Then keep doing better." There was no dramatic forgiveness because none was necessary. Real redemption was not a sentence spoken once. It was behavior repeated when nobody was applauding. A year later, Maya completed her engineering degree. Marcus Brooks was not there to watch his daughter cross the stage, but she carried his lesson with her. Do not tell me what you see first. Tell me what changed. After graduation, Maya joined a structural engineering firm on her own merits. Her first major assignment brought her back to the South Side, helping design the Community Learning Center where she now stood beneath those unfinished beams. A young intern beside her pointed toward a connection near the eastern span. "Miss Brooks, something looks different there." Maya stopped immediately. She did not dismiss him. She did not ask how long he had worked there. She did not look at his badge before looking at the steel. "Show me," she said. And perhaps that was the real ending. Everyone remembered the night a waitress saw danger before a room filled with powerful people did. Maya remembered something more important. The moment someone finally listened. One ceiling had revealed a weakness in steel. Another had revealed a weakness in people. Both could be rebuilt. Ethan had possessed enough money to own the room. But when everything that defined status became meaningless, Maya possessed something money could never purchase. The courage to notice, the knowledge to understand, and the character to act. She did not need to become powerful to prove her worth. The powerful simply had to learn that her worth had been there all along. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Hidden Table and join a community that believes true character is revealed not by power or status, but by courage, integrity, and kindness. Thank you for watching. And until next time, we'll save you a seat at the hidden tables.